Hey guys, this past weekend I went to the very first Riftbound Regional Championships in Houston, Texas. While my own personal tournament performance was not ideal, this did give me the opportunity to hang out with some amazing friends and spectate a lot of the more creative deck lists that were represented at the top tables throughout the event. One of which was this incredible Volibear deck list, which I'm going to be showing you guys today. And then I will be comparing it because it is very different from the top 64 list to the top 64 list and giving you guys a bit of explanation on the archetype along the way. If you like this content, go ahead and subscribe. If not, smash that like button anyway. Now let's get right into things. After I was out of the tournament at around round 3, I walked up to the top tables and I was like, all right, I got to see what these players are cooking because I know somebody out here's got to have a banger deck list. And there was a player whose name I can't find because unfortunately the sign-up site they used does not show players' names, but just whatever random tag they inputted, who happened to be playing Volibear at 4-0. His list was absolutely cooking, and so after his match, I had to ask him for his list so I could share it with you guys. So, for the deck list, of course, you have to be using the Relentless Storm, Legend ability, and the 10 cost Volibear Furious as your champion unit. You want to have access to him as a hard cast. Of course, you don't want to be playing the 12-drop one as your champion because the 12-drop one is significantly harder to cast. You'd rather have it in the deck to cheat it out with something like Dazzling Aurora. For the locations that this player played, and keep in mind, he played this to a 4-0, possibly 5-0 finish. Again, the site made it very difficult to find players' names and players' standings because they didn't use players' names. They just used whatever screen name they signed up with. In the future, Riot, if you're seeing this, if anyone over at Riot is seeing this, please use topdeck.gg. It is so much easier for coverage. Hashtag not sponsored. All right, anyway. For the 3 locations that he played Sigil of the Storm, Aspirant's Climb, and Obelisk of Power. Obelisk of Power and Aspirant's Climb are no-brainers. They're 2 of the best you can use for this type of archetype, this type of ramp, big creature, big mana archetype. But Sigil of the Storm is actually a little bit counterintuitive, especially as you bridge later into the game. It can kind of choke you up on resources in a weird way. So I actually think that there's some merit to playing the Spiderweb battlefield, which name escapes me. I'll put it on the screen here. But I think there's merit to playing that, especially with the rise of Annie. You'll notice that is one of the big differences between the top 64 list and this list as well. For the runes, 6 of each. Not much you need to say there. As for the main deck, I've separated it into 3 different compositions. I don't know how you say it. Basically, we've got interaction, so like stuff like sabotage, stuff like setup, and then also your units. So I think breaking things down that way is a good way to sort of compartmentalize what goes into building a deck. Starting things off with the interaction, we've got 3 sabotage, very critical card for Time Warp against Kaisa. Time Warp is one of the ways that they can close out games against you even if they start falling behind or slipping behind. When you're playing red instead of purple, like Misfortune Aurora, you don't get access to Mind Splitter to be able to rip that Time Warp from the opponent's hand. For the rest of the interaction, 3 Sky Splitter, basically a 0 cost deal 5, which is an insanely powerful card, not only in this deck, but in a bunch of other decks as well. 1 Falling Star, split damage, removal spell. 3 Void Seekers. This card helps boost consistency because not only does it take out early units, but it helps you draw towards your Aurora as well. And last but definitely not least, 3 of the signature spell, Stormbringer. This is his interaction suite, and I think it's pretty solid. The only thing that maybe he could have had a little bit more of is some early cost interaction. Sky Splitter really only works once you're set up, and same thing with Stormbringer. So I could potentially see maybe like going down on a Stormbringer and then maybe playing a few more like early ways to remove critters, because you can get rushed down pretty early by even decks that aren't really intending to do that, like Kaisa or even like Master Yi midrange, for example. Anyway, moving on to the setup spells, of course, 3 Confront. This card is dual purpose in this deck. It actually does have more than just the cantrip ability. It can give all of your units that enter ready that turn. There's a reason to play this card, which I will get into later when we talk about the units. 3 Mobilize, 3 Catalyst of Eons, goes without question. They are your orange staples, bread and butter. Advance your runes and then start dropping the most powerful units right into play as early as turn 3. Speaking of units, that's it. That's all the setup. For the units, 3 copies of Darius Trifarian. This bad boy is interesting in this deck. Not only does it work well with the Relentless Storm ability, basically completely offsetting the cost, But as you get up to big mana later into the game, you can play 2 of these in the same turn and then just have 2 7 might haste units, which is pretty crazy. Anytime you can double spell with this guy, it's going to feel pretty good. He works well with Sky Splitter. You could play 2 of these and then a Sky Splitter in the same turn, which is pretty disgusting. You can actually play 2 of these and 2 Sky Splitters in the same turn, which is pretty disgusting. So you can get some pretty crazy action going on there. However, with this in mind, I actually think there are some units you could play in place of Darius that wouldn't be necessarily that bad. You could play something like Blazing Scorcher, for example. If you play the Blazing Scorcher, then you're never actually offsetting that rune, and you're actually curving out into Aurora quite a bit better with the Relentless Storm, because this becomes not only a unit, but actually an additional ramp spell, if you think about it that way. Or you could even consider playing Misfortune. Now, Misfortune has a lot of upside in this deck. Ganking is an insane ability. It's just really, really good. Especially as the game gets more and more developed, you'll notice how important it is to have the ability to jump battlefield to battlefield, especially in these sort of comeback style decks. And then Misfortune works really, really well with your champion unit, the Volibear. You can play Misfortune to set up for a surprise Volibear turn at any point in the rest of the game, where he comes in ready because of the Misfortune's ability to ready him. However, this player was not playing either of those cards. They would just be alternates for Darius here, and I think that Darius does the job quite well. 1 copy of Warwick in the main. Now, Warwick is an interesting card. I actually lost to it in bracket. Both of my losses, or 2 of my losses in the bracket, were 2 Volibear decks, so pretty frustrating. This card definitely helps in that matchup. It also helps against pretty much anything else that has somewhat larger units that are annoying, like Master Yi. The ability to enter ready is nice too, and the fact that he is a mighty unit obviously works well with the deck. 1 Tryndamere, this is sort of a combo finish card, which I'll talk about in just a second. 3 copies of Deadbloom Predator, of course, you have to have it. 3 copies of Kedrigan, the Infernal. He's kind of like your big top end, your Sphinx's Revelation type deal. And of course, last but not least, 2 of the Volibear, imposing 12-drop Volibear. Now, this is kind of like your mighty units, your guys that you hit off Aurora and you're like pretty happy with it. Obviously, hitting Darius or Warwick off Aurora is not ideal, but you do have these 9 units here that are pretty insane off of Aurora, and even hitting these off of Aurora, if the Aurora manages to stick around, you still hit like a 7 might unit, which is about as good as you really need, if we're being honest. However, he did play a secret final unit, which I found to be incredibly genius, and I was watching it put in a ton of work. But first things first, obviously, Tryndamere, he's for the combo kill at the end of the game with Confront. You go Confront plus Tryndamere, you surprise take 2 points, and then you can take 3 points at the end of the game to lock things up. This is your Rayquaza Deoxys Legend, if you will, in order to pull back from a game that you were behind 3 points on. But yes, there's one more secret unit in this deck, and that's going to be 1 copy of Vi. And when I was watching him play, this card was winning him every game. And I was like, man, that's smart. So if you look at this deck, what does it struggle the most with? Well, obviously it's going to struggle the most with Annie. What cards take out Annie? Well, big units that are early drops, like Vi, that can also gank and hop around the battlefields to counter aggro, like Vi. And when is Vi good? When it can put back any number of these cards that happen to hit the graveyard early on, so, or I should say the trash early on. So yeah, it just worked really, really well. And then I was like, man, that's a really good tech against Annie. You know, it's got to be just for Annie. No, it's not just for Annie, because then I saw him playing up against Aurora, and I'm like, wait a second, this card's insane against Misfortune. Misfortune actually has a ton of trouble dealing with a resolved Vi, and if you've ever played the Aurora mirror match, you'll know that the player who wins is the player who runs the other player out of units first. Thanks to Vi, you now have a second chance at all of your units in the long game. So you can basically play infinite resources in game 1 in the Aurora Mirror, thanks to this 1 copy of Vi. It's powerful early, it's powerful late. It is kind of the perfect card for this deck, and I am shocked he only played 1. I actually think if he was playing up to 3 of this, it would have been fantastic. This card reminds me a lot of Scavenging Ooze from Magic the Gathering, and this deck reminds me a lot of red-green monsters or Jund monsters from that era, so it's quite funny to see something like have that similar sort of role in this deck that I've never really seen a lot of people use this. It's kind of an off-kilter pick, especially for Aurora decks, because people see it and up front it's like, oh, 3 might, I really don't want to hit that off Aurora. But then you hit it off Aurora and you put back like 4 spells and you hit a 7 might unit with ganking, and I'm like, that's pretty good off of Aurora if we're being honest. And speaking of Aurora, it's the last 3 cards. So that's going to be your entire main deck. A lot of cool tech, a lot of really interesting one-of inclusions, especially that Vi and that Tryndamere for the late game comeback. As for the sideboard, he was playing 2 additional Warwicks, 3 copies of Challenge, and 3 copies of Unyielding Spirit. I couldn't find my 3rd copy. I'm sorry, guys, but that's the 8 cards for the sideboard. Unyielding Spirit goes without saying up against Kai'Sa, counters all the damage. It also counters a lot in the mirror match, which is nice as well. Although the mirror match is not that popular, I do expect this deck to pick up more in popularity. I think it's one of the more underrated decks in the format right now. Challenge, it can hit the back rank, and it's also just a 2-cost interactive spell that works fantastically with Darius. And then double Warwick, of course, for the Aurora matchups, just because, like I said, Volibear, Furious, plus the Warwick is a one-way ticket to victory in the mirror match. Let's go ahead and hop over to the top 64 deck list. We'll take a look at that one, and we'll compare it to this one, and maybe dissect ideas that we like from both of them. So this is the top 64 Volibear deck list from this past weekend's regional championship. This list was designed and piloted by Florin Christian, a very powerful Flesh and Blood TCG player. Flesh and Blood has been sort of touted as one of the most skill-intensive card games currently out there, and I'm inclined to agree. My buddy Rare Hunter put me onto this guy and shot me over this deck list, and it looks super, super clean. So you guys are getting a little bit of an exclusive look. I'm pretty sure Florin has posted it as of right now as well. And yeah, it's got a very different composition from the second highest placing list, which is the one we saw earlier in the video. You'll notice that he's sort of skipped out on the aforementioned Darius and the Vi, and he's elected to go with Anivia and Magma Worm. Now, Magma Worm is something that was actually in the demo decks. It's a very fun unit, 8 cost with 1 power cost. Obviously, that gets replaced by the Relentless Storm, and 8 might, so incredibly strong stats. Not strong enough to really beat the Dead Blooms or the White Flames of the world, so not the beautiful threshold 9 stat that Kadrigan has, but 8 is still pretty reasonable, and it'll beat stuff like Mind Splitter, that sort of thing, or like a pumped up Kai'Sa with the Axe card that they play, and it gives all your other units the ability to enter ready. So it kind of has a similar thing to what Misfortune would do. It allows you to have a haste Volibear somewhere in the middle to late game, and then Anivia combos really well with the rest of the deck's composition. When Anivia attacks, it deals 3 to everything that's at that battlefield, which is normally pretty good to take out some smaller units, but not big enough to take out something like Kai'Sa or something like, Darius, opposing Darius, that sort of thing. Normally, I would not recommend playing Anivia because 3 damage on its own is not quite enough to really do that much outside of weird fringe matchups like Victor or that sort of thing. But when you start combining it with these cheaper damage spells, Incinerate, possibly Sky Splitter, which works really well with Anivia, the 8 cost creatures in general work really well with Sky Splitter, or Get Excited, which is another 2 cost 1 power burn spell. Still with the 3 copies of Sabotage. Obviously, Time Warp is a problem for this deck, so you just have to take it out. Also takes out opposing Auroras. It's also pretty good against Annie, which is one of the most popular decks after this weekend. And something about all these little pieces of removal, whether it's the Incinerate, the Get Excited, the Iron Ballista, or the Anivias, it gives you a lot more staying power through the early game against decks like Annie. Is it always going to be enough to bridge the gap? Maybe not. Maybe it's still more economic in a way, in a sense, to play stuff like Vi, play stuff like Darius to sort of win combat earlier in the game. The best defense is a good offense in a lot of the cases, especially in Riftbound. But, maybe this is the approach that you want to take with this deck. I do think this build looks like it would really struggle into Aurora mirrors. Aurora wasn't super popular at the Houston Regionals. The most popular Aurora build was the Misfortune Aurora build, but not playing his own Volibears, not playing, like the Vi for the late game Pot of Avarice type effect, you know what I mean? The late game Lysander's trump card type effect. It does leave you a little bit gaslight for the end of games in the Aurora Mirror. He does have a nice sideboard. He's actually sideboarding the Stormbringers, only 2 copies instead of maining them. And he's siding 3 Warwicks to help deal with the Aurora Mirror. But it looks like his main deck really is slated to deal with Annie and Kai'Sa, and that's totally valid. Like, if the majority of the tournament, like let's say 35%, for example, are playing Kai'Sa, and then another 15% are playing Annie, if half of your rounds are going to be against Kai'Sa and Annie, it may make sense to just overload on these difficult to deal with ballistas or like these Anivias that can help you keep the board clear and then just go big with Kedrigan in the end, it's probably still good enough to take down stuff like Kaisa to build this more spell-based build. It's a very interesting deck. He did end up losing to Annie in top 64. I'm sure you guys can find the stream footage. I do like that all of his main deck units are 8 might or higher, so you can go Aurora into Sky Splitter, just guaranteed, especially on turn 3 or turn 4 when you drop the Aurora. Even if you have to tap out, your Sky Splitter will guaranteedly be live. I do like this one a lot from Florin. I'm excited to try it. In fact, I was so excited to try out both of these deck lists. I sleeved them up in the airport right before my flight back and was playing against people in the airport. It's so cool to see these two different deck lists because they're, I think, about 14 cards different. They have very different compositions and very different approaches, but they're the same deck list. And I know that there's a lot of restrictions when it comes to deck building in Riftbound, especially with like the more aggressive champions, stuff like Kaisa, stuff like Annie. There's a little bit more restrictions on what you can and can't play, or what you should and shouldn't play, I should say. But when it comes to these high mana, like interesting, like engine-based late game control decks, there's a wide variety of ways you can construct them. And as a deck builder myself, I really like to see the decks that have a wider variety. And I'm sure as the card pool gets bigger, it's going to be much more exciting to see how this deck develops as well with future sets. I do think Volibear is criminally underrated. Only 20 people entering with this champion. Pretty cool stuff to both of these players. Very, very impressive showing. I'm honestly really excited to see what happens with this deck in the future because I think this is just the beginning. I think people are just starting to scratch the surface of this one. I honestly think that somewhere in between is something that I would like to try. I think I would love to try this list, the Florin Christian list, and try to fit in a copy of Vi. Like straight up, just try to fit in some copies of Vi, because with all this stuff that's hitting the trash, with how powerful Vi is in the mirror match, with how powerful Vi is against Annie in particular, which is kind of the #1 deck right now, I think getting at least one copy of Vi in here, if not upwards of 2 or 3, would be a great way for me to start practicing this build. So I'm excited to try it out. I may or may not be posting some gameplay here. And also in the future, in about a month, I am throwing a massive Riftbound tournament alongside an RBET in Vienna, Austria. So if you're a European viewer, if you're a European player, stay tuned. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel. Stick to this. And also, I should say, I am commentating the PPG 10K Riftbound $10,000 tournament and $5,000 tournament this Friday, Saturday, and Sunday on the PPG Twitch channel. I'll be posting highlights here as well, but if you want to catch more Riftbound action, make sure and tune into that stream and see your boy commentating the lovely matches from all the amazing players I am hoping to see there. In conclusion, I do think this past weekend was a massive success for Riftbound as a whole. There were a few small things here and there that can definitely be improved in future events. The big one, I think, is obviously use topdeck.gg for your tournament organization. We should not be submitting paper deck lists in 2025. And of course, don't open the doors 30 minutes before a massive tournament starts with only 3 to 5 security guards to check literally everyone trying to get in the building. Those would be the big two. Change those and you improve everybody's experience tenfold. I much appreciate Riot making sure that we had water there on site for everyone who was in attendance. I definitely appreciate being able to play against the devs. It was incredible being able to meet some of my game developer heroes and commentary heroes while also getting to play games with them, which was really cool. And then, of course, shout out to all the players who continue to cook decks in this game or any game, because we're going to be covering a lot more here in the near future. I'll see you guys in the next vid. Peace.